Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crilley. I'm back with part 4 of my no time-lapse challenge, in which I complete an illustration with no time-lapse at all over the space of 4 different videos. This is the 4th and final video, and I'm taking a piece of pastel here to start darkening in the sky. Want it to be a cloudy, rainy day. Of course, up until now it seemed quite, clear, so we need to darken things up here, and I'm just going in a pretty, spontaneous way to create a dark area of cloud cover near the top, and I'm going back in then on top of that with my finger just to sort of smooth things around. I must say I'm going to do this all real time. I'm not going to break my rules and use time-lapse, but I may have to sort of hit the pause button periodically to prepare different materials, because during this so-called final polishing stage, I am going to be trading back and forth between different tools, and especially there's this part where I want to use a opaque green paint. I probably mentioned that in the last video, where I'm going to need to prepare that. I'm going to need to mix that up. So you may, see me hit the pause button periodically. Now you see that the sort of specialty of pastels is this smooth, smoky effect that you can create with them, and that's why I always turn to pastels when I need something like this. Now I think I might actually bring in a little bit of lighter gray. I don't know if it's showing up that this is lighter, just to sort of fill in a little more. I think I'm going to allow it to go to the white of the page as we go further down. But believe it or not, this was actually a second shade of gray here at the bottom. The final polishing stage is all about sort of balancing, trying things out, seeing what needs fixing, and so forth. So I may come back and darken those upper clouds a little more. What I'm going to do while I'm still at it with this pastel stuff is to try to darken up the whole lower section here. Sometimes I do what I'm just doing right now, just use my dirty finger to add darkness, but I feel like we need, and so I'm bringing out actually black here. Because I feel like we need the foreground to move forward. How interesting. I want the foreground to move forward. And to make it come closer, I'm darkening it in, and some people may say, what are you doing? You're ruining it. You're adding black on top of all that stuff that you'd worked on. I'm going to go ahead and add further things on top of this after I've completed this. And yeah, to tell you the truth, this isn't blurring, it isn't smearing in as much as I would like, but it's going to be very helpful when it comes time to adding white gouache to these puddles. See, but I'm sort of deliberately going on top of these puddles and making them darker. And indeed, I feel like this black here is maybe a little too intense on the grass, and so I'm going to come back in. This is definitely a warts and all kind of approach here. I'm going to have to grab my eraser and get back in here and maybe lighten things up a little bit. But this is an area where I want to, like I said, use this opaque green paint later on. I'm not quite ready for that at this stage, though. So, yeah, you see me sort of darkening things in here at both the bottom and the top of the illustration, and getting ready to maybe move on to what I really associate the final polishing stage with, and that is just going back in with watercolor, colored pencil, all the various tools to sort of tighten things up and so forth. So how about if we'll go back with some watercolor. Hang on, I'm going to hit the pause button to prepare that. Alright, so I feel like various parts of this illustration would benefit from added darkness. So that's basically what I'm going to be doing right now. Coming in here, adding little bits of darkness to give a little more three-dimensionality to certain parts of the illustration. When I went in with black colored pencil at one point, what happens with black colored pencil, it's great for the precision of it. Not just black colored pencil, any colored pencil. It's really nice because you can be very precise and incremental and gradually build things up. But there is a sort of a grain to colored pencil where the white of the page invariably shows through a little bit. So going back over some of these areas with added watercolor sort of seals in all those grainy areas, like I said, where the white of the page shows through. And you get a sort of a smoother look. I think I will make her jeans, her blue jeans here, a different color. Let me go over to my blue paints. See if we can get a noticeably different. It's not real noticeable now, is it? I am sort of testing the color out before I actually put it on the page. That's always a good thing to do. You might want to have some scrap paper nearby, or what I do is sometimes just use the lower piece of the paper I'm working on, the lower edge of it that you can cut off with a pair of scissors later on or whatever. Yeah, I think adding a little blue there has helped that. Let us move on now to adding a bit more darkness to the shrine over here. I keep my eyes on the time. I know I hit the pause button, so I'm going to sort of lose my estimate of how much time a lot of this is taking. But maybe my main goal with this is just to really take this illustration as far as I can to a place where I don't have to feel any shame in putting down my brush and so forth and declaring it finished. So let's just say that if this ends up being the longest of them all, way over 25 minutes, edging up on 30 minutes, then so be it. That will give you an honest look at what this polishing stage is like. A lot of times, this so-called polishing stage, I'll spend an hour, 2 hours, depending on how big the illustration is, 3-4 hours, sort of just tweaking things. Sometimes, I remember a professor back in college saying, sometimes you have to just live with your illustration for a few days. Step away from it, do something else for a while, and then you come back to it with fresh eyes. You see it in a different way, and I find that's true. You don't even have to wait days. Sometimes you just step away for a couple of hours, and you come back and you see things that you didn't see before. So, especially for something that you care very deeply about and you want it to be one of your best pieces of work, consider working on it over a period of time instead of figuring, oh, I need to get it all done today or whatever. So this is definitely giving a little more depth to this shrine over here. And I do sort of, like I said, I like seeing what happens when you use the colored pencil, say, to add a little darkness, and then you go back on top of that with watercolor, and the two of them sort of work together. So you get a little bit of grain back there. That comes from the colored pencil. But then you get this smooth, sort of full-bodied darkness that comes from watercolor. And that's why I am a mixed media junkie, people. Started doing this years ago, mixing these things together, and I just got hooked on it, and that's just the way I work. But I would say that, anyone watching this series of videos, if you're more, let's say you're more of a marker person, and you don't like using watercolors. Watercolors are messy to you. A lot of these effects, you can achieve a certain version of them in watercolor. Indeed, you could do this all digitally. It's going to look a little different. But a lot of the principles of where the darkness goes and different stuff like that, it all still applies. Now maybe it is time for me to start moving on to the grass. Now what I'm going to do, before I go on to that opaque grass thing that I was talking about, I am going to use a little more watercolor. Just stick with the watercolors for a minute to add a bit more sort of dark strands before I go in with those light strands. So I'm going in now mixing up a sort of a dark, muted, greenish color that's going to allow me to get a bit more strands of, blades, I'm sorry, blades of grass. I think I talked about in an earlier video how I learned from Miyazaki, from his animated films, the backgrounds especially, how you can make your grass more interesting by getting a variety of plants back there, not just a whole bunch of blades, but sort of leafy things and so forth. So I'm going back in and doing a bit of that right now. And in particular, we want to get some darkness down here at the base of the grass near the road, because that's where I'm going to be dropping in some of that opaque green paint. It's like, Mark, you have been talking about this opaque green paint for like 7 hours now, and you never bring it out, man. What's going on? Yes, it's probably time for me to stop talking about that and actually do it. But not until I extend some of this added grassy detail to the other area of grass back here. I really do sort of feel like Bob Ross with this one. People have been saying that for years. I think part of it is because he didn't do a lot of time-lapse, did he? It was all pretty much live. And so you do find I find myself sounding a bit like him, because you're trying to keep a little patter going. You don't want to just say nothing. Sometimes you don't have so much to say. You start talking about the pastrami sandwich you had the other day. I don't think Bob did that. But yeah, basically we're coming up to where I'm going to try this little technique of the lighter shaded opaque grass. I think I finally can actually do that now. And that means, sadly, hitting that good old pause button again. So give me just a second, and I will be right back after I've prepared this shade of opaque green paint. Okay, here we go. So I have mixed up a sort of opaque green paint here, and hopefully this will show up. But I'm using the lightness of this to have blades of grass pass in front of all that darkness that I built up. And I noticed that, as I said, a lot of these Miyazaki films seem to use this technique, and you know, just sort of studying it, I figured, okay, you got to build up an area of darkness first, and then that allows you to get some of this lighter toned grass in front of it. So it's sort of a two-step process. And I was thinking as I was doing that this is probably a good example of something that could be done digitally, right? You build up some dark area first with whatever, you know, digital paintbrush you're using, and then you go on top of it. So it's a matter of of seeing it in advance and sort of imagining what you're heading toward, and then you are able to go on top. I'm sort of struggling to get these blades of grass to remain thin as I go on top of this. It is kind of a trick. Some of them are ending up a bit thicker than I would like, but hopefully you're getting the basic effect of what I had intended to do. And it's just a nice little trick for creating a grassy area. I think it's working. I'm going to let this area dry a little. I'm going to move over to this other area, see if I can reproduce this same effect. The trick with brushwork is that super fast stroke that, believe me, I struggle with myself. But yeah, a lot of artwork does involve sort of a 2- or 3-step process, and you know, like I said, nobody actually took me by the hand and taught me how to do this. I just looked real carefully at those Miyazaki backgrounds, and I thought, yeah, well, there's darkness, and then there's these lighter shades in front. They must sort of prepare for it in advance. And you can do the same with almost any work of art. If you look at it carefully, you can kind of do a little visual detective work and figure out how they achieved that effect, and then you play around and try to reproduce it yourself. try to darken these up, especially, or lighten these up, especially in this area where I had built up that area of darkness. I think we are getting a little Miyazaki-esque grass thing going on here. Thank goodness, after all that build-up and me talking about how I was going to do this, if this didn't work, I was going to be like, it could look good on someone else's drawing someday. Anyway, yeah, I think we probably got enough of that for right now. And I think what I'll do now is I'm sort of washing out that greenish thing. I'm going to go right in and start building up a little more texture and so forth on the road, because I think we're reaching the point where I'm going to want to do that effect of the puddles and the reflections, which I think is going to be a neat little final trick to conveying this rainy day. The big question mark is whether I want to do I want to add any indication of falling rain? And I may sort of ease my way into that by adding very light pencil strokes that suggest sort of drizzly falling rain. And if that seems to be working, then I can keep going with it. Sometimes you have to sort of gingerly work your way towards something, especially if you're fearful that you might ruin your drawing with it. So I am adding especially some extra darkness around the edge of where these, I know I'm going to be doing these puddles. You can see I got like 4 different puddles going on here. I hope they're all showing up. And just these little dots sort of symbolize pebbles or gravel or whatever that add some texture, some solidity to this road. In general, the more you work on a surface in terms of adding little dots and so forth, the more solid it appears. Now you notice that I'm making the dots on the road smaller and smaller as they get farther and farther away from me. If you don't have a reduction in the size of your texture in a situation like this, then you're fighting against that sense of distance that you're trying to create. So all of these dots that are down at the bottom of the page need to be bigger so as to appear closer. The wonders of looking at the world. Some things actually are closer to you than other things. What a lesson I'm teaching people today. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Sometimes you're deliberately making your drawing a little messy. Like I wanted these puddles to get dark. I wanted the white of the page to get a little bit eliminated from these puddles so that I could go back on top of them in a second with the gouache, and then they would sort of reflect maybe this whitish area of the sky above. Anyways, an effect that I tried once, and it worked pretty nicely. Now I'm feeling that the this fence is a little too simple looking, and I want to somewhat randomly add varying shades. Sometimes you're just adding different colors because it feels too flat and too simple. So like I'm taking this one pole here, making it darker. Taking a section over here, making it darker. Maybe this section here, make it a little darker. And that just is going to make this, somehow makes this fence look more real than if it's all just a single color. I would like to add a little more detail to those trees back there, but I don't know. I mean, this video is, this series of videos has gone on for quite a long time. I can almost hear the people sharpening their pitchforks. Crilly enough with the series of videos all on this one illustration. We are so sick of looking at that girl with her umbrella. We want you to draw something else already. Yeah, I feel almost like I'm taking a little bit of a risk with this series of videos that people will mutiny at some point and say, please, stop working on the same thing every week. But it was worth a try, huh? It's always worth a try. Do something new. Here I'm actually going in with brownish colors on top of that shrine. It's the same kind of principle. You want to get a little variety in the color if you want things to look solid. The more something seems to be a single color, the more it just gets flat, and it just reveals that it's made of watercolor rather than something else. The more you're able to vary the color scheme, the more it just sort of resembles real life somehow. If you ever look at paintings by Norman Rockwell, if you ever get in real close on the skin tones, there's just like a rainbow of colors in there. He's mixing together all these different colors to create his skin tones. And that is a trick of making that skin look more real somehow. Even if you don't necessarily see it that way in real life, it works as an illustration technique. Now I'm actually adding even just a touch of red up here, which hopefully just makes it a little more complex. Alright, not bad. Not bad, Krill Dog. Well, let's come back with a little bit of white gouache, and I think I may be able to pull this off without even hitting the pause button. Let's just go for it, people. I'm going to pull out the white gouache here and start to add lightness to these puddles in a way that will hopefully be a pretty effective little trick for conveying what you see on a rainy day. I hope this starts to pop here. And I'm being very careful not to go over the area that would be the reflection of her legs. White gouache is, of course, an opaque white paint, and that's what I mixed with that green watercolor to create the blades of grass, the tone for the blades of grass earlier. So having a little tube of white gouache with you is very helpful, if you're going to do watercolor. Again, all of this can be done digitally, and you just sort of switch to white. It is kind of funny. I feel like people who work digitally and people who work traditionally, on both sides of that equation, I encounter a lot of like closed-mindedness of of people feeling that we somehow have to wage a war against one another. No, traditional is the way. No, you're wrong. Digital, this is the future. And I'm always like, what? Why is it one or the other? Can't we do both? Why does this have to be some ongoing battle between? I feel very much that we're all doing the same thing. Really, we're just using different tools. So I don't get what the. And I've said this before, but people do, because they see me doing these videos in which I use traditional tools, some of them begin to assume that I don't like digital art and that I have some sort of beef with digital art, and that is not the case at all. I choose not to, just as I've said before, that I like to have a one-of-a-kind piece of paper art that I can give to someone or hang on my wall or whatever. That's just sort of a personal preference. But I really, honestly, don't have anything against digital art. Now, I'm using this white to give a little bit of glisten to some of these stones, but in a way I don't want them to be quite as white as those puddles. I hope I got that effect going there. I'm going to let it dry and then maybe go back on it one more time to make those puddles even whiter if needed. So I think you're getting a good sense here of this so-called polishing phase, that it's a slow, incremental period of adding final touches. I do sort of save these white gouache kind of things toward the end, whether it's for like the blades of grass or these puddles or whatever. I want that to be one of the last things that I do. Let's see if her umbrella wouldn't benefit from a bit of white gouache. Let's go for it. Rainy day. Get some reflections going on up here. And with white gouache, if you regret your choice, you can sort of take that back off. I'm going to try to get a little bit going here. Now this is watered down white gouache, and as it dries it won't be nearly as wet as it was on the other side. Sort of dabbing it in there. And I think I may even, let's see what happens as that dries. It might change quite a bit. But I'm going to add a little bit of white gouache along her coat here to give a sense of reflected light. It is, of course, a rainy day. Maybe her hair can get a little dash of white on it. Not sure I'm happy with that. I might sort of dab that off a little. With my finger, no less. Her jeans, I figure, are not going to have white, a shiny white mark on them, just because jeans are not made of a shiny material, but her boots, I think. That could work. Yeah. So, we're maybe reaching a point where I can start to wind things down, although I did say that I was going to try adding some white, or adding some very light indications of rain. So I'm going to do one last thing here with the gouache, and that is to add a few strokes to this corrugated steel roof. Especially down here near the edge, I think it would help to bring this edge closer to us. And again, push that other edge back. And I'm almost creating that sort of zigzagging pattern that you see at the end of a piece of corrugated steel. I think maybe a little here. Let's say this is reflecting the sky a little bit, the other side of this. Sometimes you're just trying to create contrast. And that's going to help to make that a little more 3D. Maybe add a few white dots on this obelisk. What I've decided is it called an obelisk, even if it's not called that at all. Yeah, that's helping that out a little. Maybe a few more dashes on these pebbles and so forth. I think the road could use more colored pencil, quite frankly, but let's say that we're going to not go there, just so that we can end this thing in a timely fashion. I'm just adding a little bit of texture here with my white paint. Maybe differentiate the edge of this support beam. And yeah, I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then let me try my technique that I was talking about with adding some indications of rain, and see how that effect goes. And if I like the way it looks, I may continue and sort of go right across the page. But let's let this dry for a second. Okay, so I've grabbed my ruler and a very hard lead pencil. Prismacolor happens to be. And the reason I make the hard lead is, or chose the hard lead, is because it's not going to show up so much on the page, no matter how hard you press down. So let's see here. I'm going to do a somewhat tentative line there. And yeah, this may or may not be a huge mistake. It would be pretty hard, I must say, to erase this once I've kind of committed to it. But I'm going to go ahead and commit to it. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Huh? Am I right? Hey, am I right? I always just fall back, somehow just fall back naturally into that Brooklyn. Now, that's probably not even a real Brooklyn accent. What do you think? Am I running it? It looks weird now because there's just a few of these, and I think part of the trick is to not have every one of them touching the top. So this one I'm having start from the bottom and trail off. And yeah, I think we may just pull this off. It's so crazy it just might work. And again, oh, my itchy finger wants to go for that time lapse, but no, I am committed to this foolhardy adventure of doing an illustration all with no time lapse. It's like I had to go to Time Lapse Anonymous this month to wean myself away from the trick of using time lapse to keep the videos interesting. Who knows? And I'll be, reading the comments and see what people thought of this this little experiment in non-time-lapseology. I don't want this to be like a downpour, kind of a rainy day, so I'm not going to draw loads and loads of lines. But one thing I might experiment with is to mix in a few white lines and see how that works. Little daring. But I may just add in a few white lines to mix it up a little. And of course we would imagine, I suppose, if you imagine what rain looks like as it falls from the sky, you would probably sooner imagine it as a white line than a gray line. So here we go. Here goes nothing. I'm going to go ahead and drop in. I'm pulling out a white, again, Prismacolor pencil. And I'm going to drop on top, especially on top of the cloud line. Oh, it's not even showing up, see? See, that just shows the Goya. I'm going to push down a little harder this time. Whoops. These Prismacolors can break on you. I mean, the lead can sort of snap. Okay, it showed up a little bit there, not very much. Let's try this again before I decide that this is just not even doing anything. Trying to get kind of white lines that will come in front and add some variety to this effect that I'm trying to create of streaks of rain coming down from the sky. I don't know if it's really working. Hang on, I'm gonna hit the pause button. We're gonna try this one other type of white Prismacolor, see if that does anything. Alright, so I grabbed this hard lead white Prismacolor. See if that's going to show up any better. I don't know. But, well, yeah, it's probably even worse, actually. So we can get this in here. Yeah, this little technique is maybe just not going to work for me today. I suppose the one other thing I could try is to use a brand new eraser that's still a little bit sharp. Let's try it again. This is just a trial and error here. Okay, so I've got here a brand new Dixon Ticonderoga mint in the box, as they would say in the Toy Story movies. But I'm going to use this eraser to hopefully erase away a little bit of that gray cloud pastel in a desperate effort to create a white line. Oh, there you go. Huh? Now you're talking. That ended up being the trick. Actually, I'm kind of glad that this that I had a sort of a moment where the technique didn't work, because that shows you how sometimes you are experimenting until you find something that does work. Sadly, sometimes you experiment and you end up ruining your illustration, so it may rather than taking a chance like I kind of did here, you might want to experiment with such techniques on a scrap of paper before committing. But I was just like, let's do it. Now you'll notice that I'm making all of these lines kind of go from the bottom toward the top. My theory being that if there's any gunk at the end, it'll go off the page and I won't be like wiping it away near the bottom. As with any technique, you don't want to overdo it. So the trick is to know when to stop. Hang on just a second. whoops. Sometimes instead of trying to wipe it clean, I'll just dab it clean because that'll smear. Sometimes it'll smear things. So yeah, I think this was a valuable experiment here in video making. I hope I didn't lose everybody. I think I may have. One interesting thing about this is I didn't advertise my books in any one of these videos. This was an ad-free series of videos. Hopefully people will appreciate that. Otherwise, I suspect that for many people, the idea of watching this many super long videos of essentially the same image again and again maybe proved a bit too much for them, and I'll make sure that the next video I do is something that provides a contrast to this image, let's just say. And yeah, maybe I don't want to overdo it with this thing. This whole thing is a trade-off, this final video especially, between what would I really do in a polishing phase if I wanted this, say this illustration was for publication, in which case I would probably devote hours to tweaking things and making sure it was perfect. I am having to sort of say, well, you know, how much can people take in terms of a super long video? Maybe it's time to wind this thing down, even at the expense of leaving this illustration not the very best that it can be. Anyway, I think we're probably where we need to be. I'm going to go ahead and finally wind this down, but I do want to say a special thank you to anybody who stuck with this entire series of 4 videos. Hats off to you. You are the few, the proud, the brave, the ones that really wanted to get an understanding of illustration and just how much time it takes. Indeed, this amounts to a rough sketch, even with all the time that I put into it. And it shows you how time-consuming it can be when you want to do something really good. But let's go ahead and lay down this pencil and finally bring this whole thing to an end. I want to thank you for watching this video and the other ones. I really hope you enjoyed them, and I'll be back with another one real soon.